Okay, welcome everyone. Once again, sorry for the delay. So this is the first informal quote-unquote conference that we'll be doing. It will be done by people just like you. There will just be like 5-minute talks and then a 5-minute question and answer session, give or take. Yeah, okay, so without further ado, we'll start with our first speaker, Hüseyin Emir Akdağ, who will be presenting why LLMs are tone deaf.
Okay, I hope my sound is clear. So welcome everyone. I'm Hüseyin Emir Akdağ, a fourth-year Translation Studies and Linguistics double major student. And today we are going to discuss LLMs and their tone-deaf nature. Now I'm sure LLMs don't sound foreign to you at this point. Like you have probably heard of them. Most likely you have used them since Google gave out Gemini subscriptions for free, basically for 1 year. But I want to touch upon the tone deafness part. So, what do I mean by tone deaf? Tone deafness is defined as having or showing an obtuse insensitivity or lack of perception, particularly in matters of public sentiment, opinion, or taste. So basically, something that's considered important, even if it doesn't seem so. So my argument is that LLMs are tone deaf in that they have a lack of perception in non-textual yet meaning-critical elements. For example, prosody and tone, which is the topic of my presentation today. So, but let's first consider how machine learning models learn. How do they use data? Let's take machine translation as an example. This is a sequence-to-sequence model trained by English and I believe Vietnamese text. As you can see, this is a parallel text. These are parallel sentences aligned side by side. We generally call them parallel bilingual corpora. And the models learn to match these up basically. On the other hand, LLMs don't need parallel bilingual data. They only need monolingual data. What I mean is that you can take, for example, Turkish text and train an LLM with only that. Like you may have seen Kumru, for example, which was only trained with Turkish data. And for each language you give the LLM, for each language data you give the LLM, it basically maps them onto a graph, let's say, called semantic embeddings. And as you can see here, we have an English and German data. We trained English and German. We trained an LLM with English and German data. And if you know German, like as you can see, like they match up fairly well. Like for example, day and Tag, and crisis and Krise, etc. So this data, keep in mind, was only collected like I collect Turkish data and I train the LLM. I collect English, I train the LLM. So there are many projects, many studies where researchers collect a lot of low resource language, like for example, let's say, languages that don't have much data, aren't spoken by that many people, but they collect their data, they annotate the data and give it to LLMs, and they hope to, with this way, they hope to make a language agnostic model basically, which can understand every language you throw at it. However, they do some, as we are going to come to a point like in shortly, they normalize the data in order to improve the performance, which works well for high resource languages. Like, think of many languages you probably learn or speak, like German, French, etc. But that normalization procedure results in in the loss of diacritics. Like, as you can see here, in almost half of the languages, I wrote at least here because there are many languages which aren't classified yet, and medicine claims that they are probably tonal as well, so this percentage may go up. In those kind of languages, tonal languages, prosody, stress, and tonal assignment matter in terms of meaning. They change the meaning. They constitute minimal pairs, if you will. So, linguists generally mark these elements as diacritics on top of characters. But engineers who are training large language models omit those so as to normalize the data. And this results in models who cannot recognize these finer details, so thus are tone deaf. For example, here's a sample data. Like, you can see a French translation of this sample sentence by yours truly. So, not the most scientific method, I know, but like, you can see the French text and an interlineal glossing for us linguists here. Also, there's a literal translation of it. And here's what the LLMs see. Large language models read through text by tokenizing it. So think of morphemes, for example. LLMs have their kind of morphemes called tokens, and when they process text, it goes through this process. For example, it tokenizes, like, it recognizes le as one token, Jean as one, un as one, il as one. You get the idea. And these are the embeddings. Like, think of them as a number of item in the dictionary. Like, think of it as LLM's lexicon. Like, the LLM says, oh, this le corresponds to the 11,000th element of my lexicon. So it recognizes that text this way. And as you can see, there aren't any diacritics in the tokens. Also, they are lowercase as well, like, as you can see. So they are normalized. However, this diacritic stripping idea harms LLM performance in low resource and tone-heavy languages, as we will see in this presentation. And as a case study, I chose Kimbundu, which is a Bantu language with around 2,100,000 speakers, which is a low resource language, doesn't have much data, and research doesn't see much, let's say, research. Not many researchers study it or collect data, so it was fit for the bill. And one of its key features I investigated in the study are interrogative sentences. You are probably not foreign to the idea of forming questions via intonation. Like, even in Turkish, we do that. Sometimes we say yemek yedin instead of yemek yedin mi. So, but Turkish has a question particle as a backup. Like, so you can rely on that too. Like, you don't lose the ability to form questions all of a sudden if you didn't perceive any tone. However, Kimbundu doesn't have one. So my hypothesis is that won't be able to form such sentences, and to test that, I gathered like 10 LLMs and chatted with them. Basically, I prompted them to. Form a question for me. Here's an example of question formation in Kimbundu. As you can see, you stress the final vowel in the verb. So, like ngalkina, I danced, and ngalkina, did I dance? Like this phenomenon doesn't pick any verb type. Like it applies to each and every verb type. Like as you can see, transitives, ditransitives, or even copula verbs. So, like the pattern is always the same. The last vowel of the verb is stressed when you want to form a question. And as I said, there are no question particles. There are no backup solutions. There is no redundancy in that regard. So here are my results. I explicitly provided that rule. I also gave the example, like you should do it this way, and even the interlineal glossing I showed you a couple slides ago. LLMs claim to understand it, and they said, like they replied, they were able to produce that form for me. Oh, here you go. Here's a question. I made it for you, but they weren't able to. And my key finding from that was, no matter the amount of training data, the LLMs couldn't correctly recreate a Kimbundu interrogative sentence. Like you can try it for many languages. I tried it for Kimbundu. So here's the test setup. You can scan the QR code if you want to follow along. I hope it works. And here are the outputs of 9 models. Sorry, I said 10 previously. So as you can see, like most of the models said, weren't able to come up with anything. Like they say, like they give explanations as if they were successful. As you may know, LLMs hallucinate all the time. They think they have done something. Like they behave as if they have done something correctly. So, like here, in 7 out of 9 models, they weren't able to produce the correct solution. These two models are, I think, are more interesting in that they perceive tone differently. Like, okay, 7 of the 9 models weren't able to do anything at all, but like if you look at DeepSeek here, I'm sure many people use them. You've probably heard of them. Like it elongates the last vowel. Like it perceives stress as elongating that syllable. Like not idea-wise, it's not far off, but like it wasn't the thing we were looking for. So. And also, Longcat, in a similar vein, prolonged the last syllable, but the tone still remains the same. And to conclude, LLMs, as you can see, fundamentally lack an understanding of prosodic meaning. Like they weren't able to change the tones. Also, they cannot process or replicate the grammatical feature that depended on stress and tone, like in our case, interrogative sentences. Even when we explicitly give them the rules, because they were trained without those, and they like don't pay attention to those diacritics. And this, in my opinion, creates a significant performance gap and bias against a large portion of the world's languages. Like, as you saw, almost half of the languages, and particularly low-resource tonal languages. So, thank you for listening. Are there any questions?
Any questions?
So I think we need to be a little bit more concise with our terms. So is Kimbundu a tonal system or a stress system?
It is a tonal language since tone makes a difference in meaning. Like, as I said, like it isn't the typical stress system where you only like stress new information. Or maybe topicalization, etc. Like, it's a productive rule where you form interrogative sentences from declarative sentences. Yes, please.
What about high resource tonal languages?
In high resource tonal languages, like there, I didn't see one. Because generally tonal languages, as you may know, are left in the dark in terms of machine AI research. So, however, if we are talking about a language that has tones in it, like for example French, that's why I chose that language to demonstrate. There are some redundancies, like. You can use the participle, or like there are basically information. There are cues about. There is redundant data about like signaling that this is a different form. So you don't need to specifically look for tones. But in this case, in Kimbundu, you don't have such tones, so you don't have such redundancies. So you only rely on the tonality to intonation to like this get that to decipher that. And since LLMs don't see that in the data, they aren't able to use that rule productively. Yes.
If all of the diacritics are stripped from the text in the pre-processing step, then how are LLMs even able to generate text with diacritics as output?
LLMs use the data you give as input too. Like, it considers it as a special token the user has given me. So it can display it, but it doesn't mean that it understands it. For example, you can try this at home, like say something, you like write something to the LLM of your choosing as a colloquial variant. For example, I tested this before coming here with bile, like the even, the word meaning even. So I said to ChatGPT, I say bilem instead of bile. It said okay. Then I said generate some sentences which are like exaggerations, maybe it was maybe the test was so hard, even the smartest, the most hardworking of the students failed it. Translate this into Turkish with keeping in mind that I say bilem instead of bile for even. And it wasn't able to produce that. Like, it claimed that it understood that, but it wasn't able to. It considered bilem as a shortened form of bilemiyorum. It tried to like I don't know. So it seems like it understood, but when you want the model to produce some output with it, it fails. Like in this diacritic example too, like it can replicate the last character of it, but it doesn't know the difference between a character with a diacritic or without it. Like it just copies the last last character and claims that it has understood the rule because it considers stress as something you can achieve with elongating it, like replicating that vowel. It clearly has training data supporting that, but that wasn't the rule we were looking for. I was looking for in this experiment. I was trying to. Like the output I desired was that the LLM put a high tone to the last syllable, not replicating the last vowel or leaving it as is. Yes, please.
If you could keep the questions and answers short, so I would be.
This is more of a, sorry.
Yeah, go.
This is more of a comment or a suggestion than a question, but I feel like this is also a matter of linguistic injustice because, as you said, tones are in no way uncommon among world languages, but most of the European languages don't have them, or most of the world speaks English, so it is obviously tends more to resemble English the models LLMs produce. And maybe you could look more into that, or maybe other typological features which are not common among the typical European languages, such as purgativity. And this, I think, also could be turned into a typology homework where you try different linguistic universals or different typological features with LLMs.
Yeah, thanks. Definitely. As you can see, LLMs are business models, and they are utilitarian in that sense. People, AI researchers, try to appeal to languages, speakers of languages who, which have more, let's say, coverage in terms of speakers. They don't want to deal with a language not spoken that much, or wouldn't bring them markets, let's say that doesn't have much markets to capitalize on. So unlike us linguists, they aren't generally interested in these kinds of languages, but more interested in improving performance on them, let's not say main languages, but the most spoken languages, since this normalization process improves the performance in those languages. But unfortunately, the side effect of that is the remaining languages are left in the dark by this process. Any other questions? Yes, please.
I was going to ask how you trained these LLM. Did you find material in Kimbundu that you gave to them for them to, how you would normally train them from the ground up, or did you take one of the pre-existing LLMs that already were trained on multiple languages, and did you tell them how Kimbundu works?
A good question. So in LLM research, there's a term called few-shot learning, where you give a few examples to the model. You don't train it because training is expensive and resource intensive, but you give several examples to the LLM. You say in this language, declarative to interrogative formation looks like this. Here are some examples of sentences which have been turned into questions this way. Because without the zero-shot learning stuff, without giving any examples, forget about it. The LLM isn't able to do so. If you give a few examples, it can gives the results I displayed in the table in the previous slide. It can claim to have inferred a pattern in it. So, but this presentation was about more like you can't throw data at these models and like throw examples at these models and explain expect them to figure out everything, solve everything. Like there is still a requirement for the human mind to look at this data and infer the rules. Like because nowadays it seems like LLMs have figured everything out. Like you can throw anything at them and they can come out with a good result. But as you saw in this presentation, it didn't. It claimed to do so, but it didn't. Even if I explicitly told them what the rule is, what the glossings are, like because in low resource languages there is this problem of tokenization too. Like if you remember the example I showed about tokenizing French sentences, the model was able to decipher what's what, like parse it really well, but in low resource languages such as Kimbundu, like it doesn't even know where a morpheme starts, where a morpheme ends. It only knows, oh, there's a space in between two words, so it's probably the word boundary. Like it doesn't have much data to work with. So that's the reason why I said without giving any examples, forget about it, because like the LLM couldn't even figure out what is what in that sentence. But like I basically helped out the LLM to figure those out, the morpheme boundaries, by saying, oh, this is a past tense, this is a question marker, etc. But even that wasn't sufficient.
Thank you once again. Our next topic is an analysis of Thanjavur Marathi, I don't know if I pronounced that right, morphology, by Jack Fleischman.
Hello, I'm Jack. I'm here just for a semester of exchange from the University of Illinois, where I'm a third year in computer science and linguistics. Last semester for my morphology class, we had an assignment to do an analysis of an understudied language's morphology, and I happened to have a speaker contact of Thanjavur Marathi, and he was kind enough to help me with this assignment and interview. So here's my presentation from that. Here's just a short agenda. We're going to cover what exactly Thanjavur Marathi is. We're going to do some brief overviews on the phonology and syntax. And then finally, we're going to look at the morphology, and then one interesting hypothesis I came up with that considerably simplifies the more obvious morphology. So we're going to start off with that. Thanjavur Marathi is a dialect of the larger Indo-Aryan language Marathi, which is spoken mainly in, main Marathi is spoken in Maharashtra, but this dialect is spoken more in Tamil Nadu, and that has led to some interesting language contact phenomena. Thanjavur Marathi has had lots of contact with Tamil, which is the much more widely spoken language in that region. And it's also Dravidian instead of Indo-Aryan. So you've got these very interesting clashes, which lead to some contact phenomena, like this dialect loses the standard Marathi features like split ergativity and distinction in aspiration. So quick look at the phonology as well. It's a fairly simple vowel system. It's got the standard 5 vowels, I, U, E, O, A, and then the schwa as well, which is actually in free variation with the a as in the initial syllables of polysyllabic words. So you'll see this coming later in some of the morphological examples, like the word for house is gar, but it's gur sometimes when you add affixes. There's also these back low mid monophthongs, like I think it's a and those are only in English loanwords. Even they were introduced about the 18th, 19th century, I believe, and they're still to this day only found in these English loanwords. Here's the just chart of the consonants as well. You can see it's fairly standard for Indo-Aryan and Dravidian languages, except as I noted earlier, there is no distinction in aspiration. I did have to edit the chart of standard Marathi and take out all the aspirated ones, so that's why it looks sort of spaced out, but there's just no literature on this dialect, so this was about as close as I could get. But yeah, you can see there are lots of, it's very symmetric. You know, we've got the full series of stops that's reflected, and same with the alveolar and alveopalatal distinction further down. So here's another interesting phonological effect. The word for man is manos normally. When you add the suffix al, you can see sometimes the o is deleted, but it's not systematic at all. This is just an example of the a bit of a warm-up to morphology where you get these morphophonological interactions going. I actually don't have an explanation for why this happens. My current working theory is something to do with stress or other prosodic natures, or it's just in free variation and there's not a hardcore rule governing it. But getting more into the syntax, it's very simple. It's just very strict head final subject object verb. You see this example sentence down here, mite manosoj garam sunikto, which is I'm leaving the man's house. You can see we have the modifiers going before the nouns in the noun phrase. We have the subject first, we have the verb at the end. It's very, very head final. So now we get to the meat of the presentation, and that is the morphology. So here's just the verbs that we'll use. You can see they have a three-way gender distinction and the third person singular, and also that the second person plural is also used as the formal, which doesn't show up much in the data, but it is important to note just because it shows this is a very typical Indo-European feature. So you can see for the example for ka-it, we have kato for both the first singular and the first plural, and the third person singular masculine, and then we've got katos katant, kati katara katat. You'll see this paradigm. This is the present progressive. You will see some of the examples later are in the past tense, and that just changes the T to a le, so that's actually an aspectual suffix and a personal suffix combined for simplicity. Here are the noun cases. The nominative is unmarked, as is fairly common cross-linguistically. There's a genitive aj, which is used mainly to mark progressives. So in this example, te poraj manjer, the boy's cat. We have this suffix, which is accusative dative, which the suffix is al, but this is a bit interesting because it's used as the patient of transitive verbs, but it's also used to mark the indirect object of ditransitive verbs, so it's somewhat between accusative and dative, which is why I've marked it like this. We will revisit this later in the presentation to give a bit of a better explanation. And then we also have the oblique, which is used before postpositions in this language. So you can see in this example, manjur gara ver haiha. Haiha is just the copula, and the word for house is gar. Ver is the postposition on. So in this case, we add the suffix before the postposition. Here are some postpositions that act as suffixes. We have in, ant. This also has an example of code switching in here. For the cat is in the box, we have manjur boksant. Tu is al as well. You'll notice this is the same as the dative suffix. It's used in postpositional context as well. And then we also have, interestingly, the sort of ablative sense, the sun suffix, must follow another postposition always. So you can see in this example, garang sun, it's from in the house, more literally, but you can never have like gar sun. That's never seen in any of the examples I was given. So this postposition can only ever follow another postposition. Here are some standalone postpositions. We have ver for above. We saw that in an example sentence earlier. We have serdiri for near. And interestingly for at, we have both kad and kada. I have a few theories for what's going on with this alternation. One is that maybe it takes the oblique suffix and acts as a noun in some cases. But right now I'm just treating it as an alternation for the simplicity of this short little talk. So here's an interesting thing, a hypothesis that I have going. What if there were only two cases? Here's just a quick note on vowel hiatus resolution to warm up for what I'm about to introduce. Notice that it's very simple. If you add the al suffix dative to pani, you get panil. So the second vowel in the hiatus is deleted. And this is very strict. Baikol becomes baikol. Lenkuru becomes lenkuru. There is also, you do get lenkural sometimes, but looking into the history of these languages, the Sanskrit syllabic r, when the language evolved into Marathi, that became a ru. So it's possible that at some point there was a lenkur, and since there's no vowel hiatus there, you would get lenkural, and that was just sort of fossilized. And you can see the standard, when a word ends with a consonant, you get the full al suffix. So that motivates this look. So the al suffix, as you'll note, it seems to be used as both a noun case and a postposition in this current analysis. And also, whenever you have some postpositions, it's not always clear when to apply the oblique. If we go back, we can see that a little better maybe. We have it all here for these suffixing ones, but for here you don't, right? You have boksant. And that's kind of a weird distinction to make, I feel like. So to simplify it, I'm going to make use of the fact that all the proposed case endings begin with a, and the way that a lot of these selected, when the accusative or dative is used, it's very similar to how prepositional phrases are selected for in other Indo-European languages. So you've got like Temanush pani pila for the man drank the water, but you have Telinkuru garal paila for the child saw the house, where you have these two transitive sentences and only one of them is taking the dative like this. Just as a final note, Standard Marathi, I found a bit of literature enforcing that they also have a similar two-case system in some analyses. So here's an idea. What if there were only the nominative and the oblique cases? So for example, you have no more dative, it's always a postposition, and the genitive would also be a postposition as well. So this has actually, you can see at the example, we've got pani plus the oblique a, and then the al. And the vowel hiatus resolution just ensures the surface representation il, which actually explains a lot of the irregularities we had earlier, like why some of the postpositions, if we go back to that table really quick, you can see they all begin with a as well. So all of these things that end with the same sound and lead to these strange irregularities throughout the language are all explained by this combination of the oblique being the true underlying case of the noun, combined with this vowel hiatus reduction rule. So that's the wrong slide. But this leads to almost the exact same case in some literature for Standard Marathi, which is a direct oblique system, which is, I think, very similar from the very little literature I was able to find. So in conclusion, we've just got this really rich nominal morphology paradigm with all of the different postpositions and two possible analyses for the case system, one with the four-way, including the accusative and the genitive, and one where those are analyzed as postpositions, and it's considerably simpler. I do need to note, I need to do a lot more research for this. I was only able to have one speaker contact for this. I had very little data to go off of, and there's very little literature to aid me. So I think it's important that we find more speakers and do more, conduct more research in this area. So thanks for listening to me ramble. Any questions?
But can we keep the questions and the answers?
Yes.
Okay, I'll keep it very short. Could you go back to the postposition suffixes slide, please?
Yeah, whoa, that was too far. There it is.
Yeah. What motivates you to say that these are suffixes and not cases?
Mostly, I did cheat a little bit. My speaker contact was a linguist, so he had a few insights in this. But on top of this, I don't have a great answer actually, but I think a big part of it is it can be used in nonverbal sentences, so it seems to not, there could be some weird things going on syntactically under the hood, but I think it would be a bit difficult to understand how these cases are selected for. Anything else?
Okay. Thank you.
Cool.
So, our next talk is Notes and Notions, Jazz, Words and the Improvising Mind by Ulya Kucur.
I had 2 midterms this week, and I'm much better at doing design than this, but I was in a hurry. So it was very improvisational to prepare this presentation, so I think that fits the mood. Right. Do I need to present? Do I need to introduce myself? Okay. I'm a first grade student in the philosophy department, and I'm interested in linguistics and jazz stuff. Oh, and I'm called Ulya. Welcome to this presentation. I'm going to talk about, you're going to listen to me yap about how I think jazz improvisation and stream of consciousness writing have a very similar cognitive process behind. Luckily for only 5 minutes. All right. So lately, I've been thinking on what happens in the mind when we improvise, both in music and in writing. Like, how do we generate something structured in real time without pre-planning? And what connects a jazz solo and a stream of consciousness text? Shit, I'm so stressed. All right. Yeah. All right. Both are forms of real-time thinking. They unfold under time pressure, moment by moment, and they require an awareness of rhythm, flow, and structure. But they still leave room for unpredictability. And, is this like the worst 5 minutes of your day? All right. So, there's a poet called Jack Kerouac, and he's someone who said that he wants to be considered a jazz poet blowing the lung blues in an afternoon jam session on Sunday. And he called his poetry spontaneous prose because he would write in a stream of consciousness writing, and they would be, they were very inspired by jazz music too. So, I'm actually going to come to a point. Wow. Alright, both jazz and spontaneous writing rely on temporal awareness, a sense of where you are in time. There's an associative flow in which random, quote-unquote, connotations are not to be secreted but highlighted. There's an embodied relationship to rhythm in music and syntax in writing. So how you write and how you play matters, and So you need to keep in mind what you just played and also plan about what you're going to play in the next second. So you need to be aware of where you are. At the same time, in writing, you need to, well, there is a structure that you need to keep, but it's a structure that you create moment by moment. And in music, you compose moment by moment, so you choose the rules that you will implement into the text. And yeah, Kerouac said first thought, best thought, and yeah, that's it. Here's a short passage from Linguistics' work Sunflower Sutra, and I think that reflects the spirit well. It goes, I walked on the banks of the Tinkan Banana Dock and sat down under the huge shade of a Southern Pacific locomotive to look at the sunset over the Box Hills and cry. So the syntax here is breath-based, like you stress the parts that you want to stress. It depends on you how you read it. And it's like he's not imposing a structure beforehand. Like the effect and emotion creates the form of the text. And I find that very similar to musical phrasing. So there's that. Cognitive science actually helps explain a lot about how this happens, because improvisation depends on predictive processing. It's the brain's ability to anticipate the next note or word, like what I mentioned before about temporal awareness. And there's working memory at work. It maintains structure, like you need to remember what you just played, stuff. And what is that? There's self-monitoring, and this is one of the most interesting parts about this, I think, because there's this Miles Davis quote that goes, you need to play not what's there, but, okay, it goes like, no, do not play what's there, but play what's not there. So it's like, you need to have an imaginary melody in your mind, and then you're going to reply to that. So there's like a response, play and response? How do you say that? Call and response, thank you so much. Call and response process going on. Like you hear something and then the thing that you play, the sound that you produce is like a reply to that. So there's a kind of dialogue in that process, and that is present in stream of consciousness writing too, because when you just start writing anything or start talking using words, you are actually assuming that there's an interlocutor. Like it doesn't have to be a specific person or like an imaginary friend, but it is the idea of the other, something else, that is listening, that could interpret what you're saying, that could receive the signals that you're sending. So I think there's a dialogue process in writing and any form of linguistic expression too. That's pretty interesting, I think. Yeah, this is what I just mentioned. There was a very good video of a jazz guitarist, but I couldn't add it to there. Yeah, in jazz, pauses invite imagination. In writing, ellipses, line breaks, and white space speak. Wow, that's poetic. This is the most poetic presentation in this conference, I realize that. Yeah, wait, that is a very assertive sentence too. I'm gonna back that up with what I just... Okay. Right, so I'm talking about improvisation, right? This whole presentation is about how we decide what we're gonna say the moment that we, act. Like being sensitive to nuance and the changes in your environment and stuff. So what I'm doing right now is like a response to the current stress that I'm experiencing, because I have nothing else better than to do that. Well, I tried a lot to plan this out and actually made a presentation. And this is the least improvisational thing that I've done this week. Wait. Yeah. Life mostly isn't like this. It's looser, more porous. Outside this little timer, like 5 minutes timer. That's what's stressing me out. That's where real thought and creation happens, and it's not in what we've prepared, but in what surprises us as we speak. The things that you realize about yourself as you write down things, or as you sit on something, an instrument, or try to sing. Like a response to that moment, and you need to be in that moment for that to be called improvisation, because it's a way of being. That is why I think it's could be called a model of consciousness. But I of course need a lot of cognitive science data to back such a claim. We should study on that, I think. And yeah, I think what I wanted to say was we should improvise more. And maybe if you try that, you could handle such situations better than I'm doing right now. Oh. Yeah, I have a minute left. So what's left for me to... That's left for me to improvise, I guess. Is there anything else? Oh gosh, at least put something else in there. This is a topic to go on about for hours and hours, and I can do that very pleasantly, but not in such a form, because this is really not what I'm used to. Maybe blame it on my youth. Right. Gosh. Can I just end it? Yes, thank you so much. Oh God.
Any questions? Or...
Yay.
Yeah, oh yeah, sorry, yeah. I didn't.
Let's go.
Yeah.
I think cellular automata have been studying before as like it's a model that builds itself simultaneously, but it's able to use recursion. And of course, like you can build a like Turing machine with it, which is that like it can operate as a computer. I'm sorry, I wasn't discreet about what a cellular automata is, but I just wanted to say like this topic is something like is being I think recently researched about like how spontaneous structures seem to embody recursion and can like act in complex manners like language. I don't know where I'm going with this sentence, but I just wanted to say yes.
I'm enjoying it a lot. Yeah, improvising. Thanks a lot for that. Well, I've been actually scanning some articles about on some scans, fMRI scans of brain, and they looked what part of your brain and what networks are at play when you're improvising both linguistically and music-wise. Like that improvisation doesn't have to be a stream of consciousness type of writing, but it could be like freestyle rap or like an acting, actually, improvisatory acting. And there are some similar things going on. I think I had them here. It's a very terminology-heavy paragraph, but I think it's pretty interesting, and I can simplify that, hopefully. Jazz improvisation and musical improvisation generally is characterized by a pattern dissociation in prefrontal cortex, decreased activity in lateral dorsolateral PFC, areas often linked to conscious monitoring and inhibition. So it's like I'm seeing myself from an external point of view and judging myself, like limiting some of my actions and deciding not to do some things because of what I think about how I will be perceived from the outside. So it's like a kind of some internal constraints that I have that I need to implement. So that brain region is not deactivated, but the activity in there decreases in the dorsolateral PFC, and there's an increased activity in medial prefrontal regions linked to self-initiated stimulus-independent thought, which is your, if I'm correct, your ability to respond to, what's the word for that? Yeah, but current stimuli, like stuff that's happening right now, what I mentioned about temporal awareness. So it's like you are in this moment and you are aware of your environment, so you respond to your environment very quickly. So I think that's pretty interesting, because I would always think that such improv processes included, high prefrontal cortex activity, because I thought of it as something, very superior. But actually, if you step out of yourself for a bit and just stop thinking about yourself, that's when you get into that process of flow, and you can actually, quote unquote, lose yourself in, writing and creation and any type of artistic process. And I think that's pretty interesting. Actually, I talked about the musical improvisation part, and there's the lyrical and language improvisational part. They scan the brains of freestyle rappers, and it shows a very similar signature, a dissociation between medial and dorsolateral prefrontal regions during improvised performance, plus strong coupling between medial PFC, suggesting an integration of motivation, language, affect, and motor output during spontaneous verbal improvisation. So they're very closely related, and I think there's a lot to this topic to, dig deeper into, whatever you call that. Is it done? Yes. There's another question.
So you say that improvisation requires as much or more than more consciousness and cognitive effort than non-improv activities, right?
It depends on what you mean by cognitive and conscious effort, but yes and no at the same time. Because if what you mean by that is thinking about your own thoughts, like doing metacognitive activity, that is supposed to actually decrease, surprisingly, because you are not meant to judge yourself and limit yourself while you're creating freely. So it's like a half-conscious state, not definitely, but close to that. Closer to that from a very self-aware state, let me say. And that was what surprised me in my research, actually. Because you are getting away from your sense of self. It's like you stop thinking about yourself and you just become one with the instrument, whatever it is you're using to create the actual instrument, like the piano or the guitar or the stuff. So it's like it is a reflection of you, your thought process, and it's not constrained by your finicky critic that's sitting on your prefrontal cortex judging you, do not do that, do not go there. So I think that's the most authentic representation of human consciousness, actually. That's why it's very interesting to me, this whole improvisation stuff. Yeah, that was enough improvisational, this manner that I spoke in. Thank you for listening to me.
Of course, if you have any more questions, then you can ask them after. Yeah, so our next talker is Khadija Rahimova, is that correct? Yeah, she will present language thought and moral perception, exploring linguistic relativity.
Hello everyone, I'm Khadija. I am a first-year undergraduate student in the history department. So yes, I am not a linguistic student, so if anyone would like to add their interpretation of anything I have to say here, I'd be more than happy to hear that. So, language and linguistic relativity. What really initially got me into, there's no way I'm doing this in less than 5 minutes. What initially sort of sparked my curiosity into this topic is one day, my French teacher saw this sort of photograph of me when I was like, I don't know, 6 or 7 years old in first grade. It was the very first play I took part in. I was standing there with like an angel costume, like a halo around my head, and she was like, "Oh, c'est toi, like, is that you?" And I was like, "Oui, madame, that was me back when I had hope for humanity." And she's like, "Why don't you have any more hope?" And I was like, "I'm trying to hold on to it. That's what I'm trying for every day." And then that's when she said, "L'espoir fait vivre." And I stopped there for a second, because it's a French proverb. And if I had to translate this, it's actually pretty complicated, because there's a verb in there, faire, I mean, French speakers here would know, which literally means to do. But here, it's very contextually dependent. So if I try my best to sort of express this in English, it would be something in the lines of like, hope makes one live, or hope gives meaning to life. I don't know, you fill in the blanks, but, and this line stayed with me because it did not sound like the version that I grew up with. Now, in Russian, we'd say, hope dies last. So that small difference, I feel like, there's this difference between a sentence having this sort of sense of vitality inside it. It's almost like a life force, and as opposed to this sounded sort of like an old fragile thing clinging, like in the face of death, like an old companion next to you. And it led me to start asking much bigger questions, like what if translation was not about words, but about worlds? And one other famous, very common example is Descartes' famous claim, "Je pense donc je suis," which is very commonly translated as, "I think, therefore I am." However, if we have any French speakers here, you would know that we can also translate it to English as saying, "I am thinking, therefore I exist." Now, the difference is Descartes says this statement when he asks, "How can I know that anything around me exists?" So it could be that your cognitive faculties, your vision, or anything is deceiving you, or the world might be an illusion. And so Descartes' like, if the world and if my body and nothing exists, does that mean that I also do not exist? And he illustrates this in his meditation saying, no, because if I doubt that I exist, who or what is doing the doubting? So doubting itself is a form of thought. So if I'm doubting, there's something that's doing the thinking. So logically it follows that I prove that I am thinking, and so I exist. And I feel like the difference in these translations is there's a difference between an expression of mere certainty and the impossibility of doubt. And I am certain that I exist is not the same thing as saying I can't doubt that I exist. If you're dealing with philosophy, I'm pretty sure these are really important distinctions. And so this sort of drives me to ask, does language merely express thought, or does it also shape the way thought itself takes form? And one idea that's apparently called the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, it's not a hypothesis, I have no idea why it's called a hypothesis. It's the idea that language significantly affects thinking, and the way that different languages are structured, they really influence the way we think. And this is also similarly known as the linguistic relativity hypothesis. It's the idea that the language that we speak influences the way we think about reality. And it's very highly controversial. There's really little empirical research done within this topic. Then came researchers who tried to sort of ground it in data, like John Lucy. Now, John Lucy did something really interesting here and very quite useful. He took this big abstract idea and he broke it into 3 distinct levels of how language might influence thought. So the first level was the semiotic level. So this concerns how having any symbolic language as opposed to animal communication changes human thinking. So this is more about not like English versus Japanese or something like that, but more of like language versus no language, if that makes any sense at all. So it asks what happens to cognition once we start labeling things and we begin using symbols to represent the world. And by symbols, I obviously also mean like the alphabet, or like when you actually assign a label to an object or an idea or a thought. And then we have the structural level, which is very, very highly debated. It mainly concerns the structure of grammar, syntax, and anything that has to do in that category, basically. And we have the functional level, which examines how language is used in different contexts. In education, for example, that should be education, not educated, or everyday speech. What we're concerned about today is mainly the structural level. We don't have time for this. So, John Lucy has this one very famous study which was quite influential in the area of linguistic relativity. So he compared two languages, English and Yucatec Maya. So now in English we all know that you can't really talk about an object without like marking whether it's singular or plural. So if I have like a microphone, I know that this is one microphone. Let's say there are two microphones on the table. When we hear like the word microphones or like candles, we probably still will picture, I don't know, like 300-400 a patch of candles lined up on a table. But in Yucatec Mayan, things work quite differently. Plural marking is apparently optional. I'm not quite sure if it's optional or whether it might also not exist. I'm not really sure about that. But nouns don't automatically refer to individual items. So instead they refer to substances or materials. Here's an example. So in English, what we would say one candle, and Yucatec Mayan would be something in the lines of sit kip. That's not how you pronounce it. But there's like a classification right here, which translates to long and thin. So it's classifying the candle not by count or by number, but by its shape or its substance. And this sort of shows us that like English and many European languages, I'd say, they encourage thinking in terms of discrete countable units. And as opposed to like Yucatec Mayan, we think in terms of like substances and their materials. And then John A. Lucy describes in another experiment, followed by this one, how he designs a nonverbal experiment that concerns memory tasks. So if language affects thought, speakers might attend to different properties when encoding these objects into memory. He asks these two groups of participants to order objects like candles, wax, sticks into groups and to recognize them. So the weird observation was the fact that English speakers tended to group these objects by shape. So a candle and a stick were grouped into the same group because they're both long and they're thin, mostly. There were more objects, by the way. These are two examples. And Yucatec speakers tended to group the objects by their material. So a candle and a wax were in the same category. There's another famous experiment by Stephen Levinson, the domain-centered space experiment. So this sort of describes how spatial relationships in our language affect how we perceive and remember spatial relationships in the world. And so, in English, we mostly use body-centered spatial terms. For example, this phone right here is to the right side of me, or the cup is in front of the plate. So your location depends on the speaker's orientation. So in my case, it depends on my orientation. So what's left for me may be the right side for you. And As opposed to that, there's an Australian Aboriginal language, which I can't pronounce the name of, that uses a sort of geocentric spatial term. So they would say something like, the man is to the east of the tree, or the cup is to the north of the plate. So these are fixed directions, and they are highly dependent on the speaker's body. And another example would be a Mayan language from Mexico, which uses topographic spatial terms. So they'd say the man is uphill the tree, or the house is downhill. And in an experiment following that, they were asked to arrange objects, like I guess like little toy animals, say like 3 in a row. They were rotated 180 degrees and asked to recreate the exact same layout on a U table. So English speakers recreated the pattern on their own perspective, so left to right, as they saw it. And the Australian Aboriginal speakers, they kept the original cardinal orientation, but they'd line up north to south, and even though they themselves had turned around. And we don't have time for that. So another question that I ask is, so if language could, in some sense, at least to some degree, provide the coordinal system for perceiving space, perhaps it can also provide the moral coordinate system for which we evaluate human behavior, at least to a certain extent. So this study is personally one of my favorites because it's such a simple change in wording that it quietly sort of rewires how we judge people. So researchers wanted to see whether the way we describe an event linguistically could actually sort of shift how we assign blame to people, or how much financial responsibility we assign to someone to someone that we think deserves it. So it all comes down to the idea of agentive versus non-agentive framing. It's kind of like similar to the active and passive voice in English, I guess. So if I say, she broke the vase, that's agentive framing. And if I say, the vase broke, that's non-agentive framing because it removes the agent. So researchers wanted to know, could simply describing an event differently or using or omitting the agency change how much we blame and how much financial punishment we actually assign to a person. Apologies. So this is the example of the report. Mrs. Smith caused a fire in a restaurant. So in the first example here, in the agentive report, as we can see, Mrs. Smith, all of her friends, she flopped her napkin, she had ignited the napkin, she toppled the candle, ignited the whole tablecloth too. And in the non-agentive report, we removed the agent. So her napkin flopped, the napkin had ignited, the tablecloth ignited too. So after reading, the participants of the study answered the following question. So how much blame Mrs. Smith deserved, and how much financial compensation she should pay. And by the way, these are two separate groups of participants, obviously. And people consistently assigned more blame and higher compensation when the event was phrased agentively. So that means she caused the fire, as opposed to the non-agentive version. And yeah, so the same thing with the financial penalty difference. So participants fined her about $935 on average in the agentive condition versus $689 in the non-agentive one. And that's like roughly 36% higher. So this sort of leads me to ask if language frames the foundation in which humans shape perception. Might it also subtly at least steer implicit moral judgments and ethical evaluations? There's really little research done in this area, but yeah, I feel like it's important to look into. Thank you. Any questions?
I'd like to first say thank you, because this is a very interesting subject. I've never thought about language influencing ethics before. Could you go back one slide, please?
Sure.
I think.
Is it this one?
Yes,
Okay.
I think this is based on a false premise because I don't agree that languages frame the foundations that humans' perceptions are shaped. Because all of your
Not sure people
examples,
agree with that.
yeah, all examples you gave, we can argue that the language reflects the culture rather than language influencing the culture. We can say that the language was shaped that way because humans are that way in that culture, right?
Can you read that last sentence?
So sure. So can we argue that the language reflects who we are rather than influencing who we are? As a culture or as a person?
I would say it would be a little bit of both. I mean, this is, again, it really depends on the context, but I agree with one thing that you said. Obviously, all of our sort of judgments or thoughts or moral judgments are obviously not based on the language itself and the language that we were brought up in. I was trying to show whether, I was trying to ask whether, linguistically speaking, a specific language and sort of the components that compose that language, so the grammar, the syntax, absolutely everything, does it at least play some sort of role in shaping the way we think, at least to some degree. But yeah. Thank you.
Do you know if any of these types of experiments have been done on second language learners? Like maybe, I know there's that famous experiment on like German versus French, the genders of words influence the perceptions of those objects, like key, for example, as it goes masculine and German and feminine.
Yeah, and I think German has like three, I wouldn't say genders, but like the masculine, feminine,
linguistic term is gender.
and French would have like, I have no clue about I don't know about that research, but I'm pretty sure that I feel like there is still some sort of influence in the components that compose the language itself.
Because I was thinking, going off of what he was saying, if it was truly just a reflection of the culture, if a second language learner from someone who their language had no noun gender, for example, went to learn that, would they still show those same associations?
I think that's a really important distinction as well, because it's really, as a second language learner myself as well, especially in, let's take Russian and English. Now, it's really common that when if a Russian, for example, or someone who speaks Russian, someone who has their first language is Russian, adopts English as a second language, and initially the way we offer our response might sound, in the surface level, very direct. And I think it also comes down to saying that every single component that composes the language has a big influence into the way we think, because we weren't exposed to these characteristics that you mentioned about like different genders. We don't have that in English. So I feel like that does have an influence. Thank you.
Less than a question, but just a quick statement. I think that the study that you're referencing is German and Spanish, and it was like bridges and keys. Is that the one? Yeah, I read somewhere that that's actually like it couldn't be replicated, and the study was actually never been published.
It's
shaky,
but I'm saying like
as
an example for sort of.
Well, could you ask it? Okay, go for it. But please keep it short, please.
Because that subject was kind of a part of my research paper, and there is a study done on translation of the same text of English and Spanish, and they want to see how much the readers remember motion, specifically because English and Spanish mark both motion separately, differently. One is a satellite frame, the other is a bird frame language. And they did observe a difference. I believe I can try to find it and send it to you.
Wait, can I mention one very last thing?
Yeah,
very quickly. I'm sorry, I don't know your name. Going back to what you said, basically, I think, so even if you take like French, we have this sort of gender, which, I mean, sorry, it's like a pronoun that's like on. So that's like, I can't even describe it in English because it's this sort of non-existent. It's not a person, it's not a he, it's not a she, it's more of, it can be a collective audience, it can be a singular audience as well. And I think that if language and the language itself, it did not have any influence in the way we think, I think we would not have as much trouble in translating certain proverbs or idioms or...
But they're cultural.
They are cultural, but they're also embedded within the entire sort of sentence and the way it's constructed itself, I'd say.
I think it comes out. Can we talk after? Because
we should. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you.
Okay, so the next talk is by Boğaziçi. It's titled "The Apicolabial Shift in Southern Oceanic Languages."
Hello, I'm Boğaziçi, and I'm just going to be infodumping about the apicolabial shift in Southern Oceanic languages. I am a first year in Boğaziçi, and I'm a linguistics student, so it's a little bit less technical than the talks that we've had so far, just in case you're disappointed. So, first off, what are the apicolabial consonants? These are consonants made with your tongue and your upper lip, in case you don't know what the name sort of implies it. So these are consonants like n, p, b, n, and that last one I'm not really going to get into. But if you're curious, you can ask about it in the Q&A section. And they're found in this specific region in Vanuatu. And within Vanuatu, like within these two specific islands in Vanuatu, these are called Espiritu Santo and Molecular. And now you might be asking, like, that's North Central Vanuatu, why are you calling it Southern Oceanic? They're two different things. Southern Oceanic is a top-level node that connects North Central Vanuatu to other things. And yes, you are right, and please do ask about that in the Q&A section because I don't have time. So, what I want to talk about is the apicolabial shift itself, which I did put in a nice little scheme here. So you have Proto-Oceanic bilabials, which when they precede non-back vowels, or in Proto-Oceanic that distinction can also be made with roundedness, but it's usually called non-back. So these are A, E in Proto-Oceanic, yes. These bilabials, when they precede those sounds, become palatalized. Now, what does palatalization mean? It doesn't actually mean palatalization. It could be palatalization, but it could also be something else. We just call it palatalization because it's just some process that makes the tongue advanced while pronouncing these bilabial sounds as bilabials. And I will get to that in a second because we do have some evidence. And then, when the tongue is advanced, it is going to try to move even further, like outside the mouth. And they become apicolabials, and then you have like from n to n. Your tongue is outside your mouth while you pronounce them. So Nesse, for example, is a language that is in the apicolabial stage, and I'm calling it a stage for a reason. I will get to that in a second as well. And sometimes it can go even further. These apicolabials can become alveolars or dentals, like in Sakara, which is, I think, in northern Espiritu Santo, sort of away from the region, but that's also something you can ask in the Q&A section because I will. Again, I probably don't have time to do that. So yes, so you can come from bilabials to apicolabials to alveolars and dentals, and this is not just found in one language, it's found in lots of other languages. So, in the area, of course. So I just talked about palatalization, but I didn't really give any evidence supporting why we call it palatalization, or why we think that this was that intermediate stage, or why between bilabials and apicolabials, this thing would have happened that would advance the tongue. The supporting evidence that I have is vowel fronting, which is found in, well, the most data we have on this is about molecular languages. We don't really have a lot of data on Espiritu Santo, but, it still implies that it's just a lack of data and all that. So when you have a U, which is a back vowel and a rounded vowel, that follows one of these bilabials that become apicolabials later on, they become an E. In that environment, they're E. So this is not causation. It's just telling us that some quality of these bilabials that shift into apicolabials, some quality that they have, it was causing a shift from U to E, which is fronting, which is also done by advancing the tongue root. So there's something about those vowels that is just making the tongue advance.
And it's probably the same process. We don't know if it's palatalization, but we call it palatalization. So we have this neat model that I just explained to you, like but the reality doesn't really reflect that. So there's a language biannual that does sort of reflect that, but we don't know if it actually does. You can ask about in the Q&A section as well, because it's sort of complicated. There's different theories or hypotheses, more likely. And in Sakha, I just explained to you that they went all the way to become like alveolars or dentals. And Nese is like chaotic, like complete chaos, because you have reflexes of like proto-oceanic pika, meaning how much. That is reflected as vise in Nese, yes. And the proto-oceanic pano, meaning go, is reflected as la. So one of these is a bilabial fricative, the other one is an apicolabial fricative, but they're both in a non-back environment. So this could be both that it never went through the change, or that it did go through the change but reverted back. What they did revert, they can revert back, like in Tanwa. So I just showed you this chart. The building had alveolars and dentals. They can all become bilabials again. So what does this imply? It implies lots of things, because lots of these languages in this area, in this region, so you just reflect the Proto-Oceanic bilabials, the plain bilabials, not labiolars, as plain bilabials. Not labiolars, or they don't merge with, they do merge with the labial, whatever. So how do you know that they went through this stage? Well, you really can't, because there is no environmental change. You just sort of accepted it as it is. So this could be a reflex, a plain reflex of the Proto-Oceanic bilabials, but it could also be that they went through this all these stages and then went back to bilabials. So Tutuba, for example, is a language that does have these phonemic apicolabials, but they're disappearing and they're shifting back into bilabials. So there's not if we only documented this language 100 years later than we did, there would be no evidence of these apicolabials ever existing. So speakers older than 50 pronounce butterfly as bebe and paper as bebe, but speakers younger than 50 pronounce both as bebe. And they don't make that distinction, and when a speaker says these two things out loud while facing a wall, they cannot hear the difference. Also, lastly, I'm going to talk about apicolabials as a prestige feature. So in Tongva, only male speakers have this sound. Female speakers do not have apicolabials. Instead, they use the bilabial. So a male Tongva speaker, actually an older male Tongva speaker, because this is also disappearing, would pronounce I as pata and snake as mata. But a female speaker or a younger male speaker would pronounce both as mata. Also, just as a note that bilarized labial could be both like mata or mata. I don't know, I actually didn't need to say that. Yeah, I cut that out. Never mind. So why should we care about apicolabial sounds? I care about them because, well, they're interesting, but in the grand scheme of things, we should care because they exist. So this is proof articulator of possibility. They only exist in this one place, and this just shows that even though they don't exist anywhere else, they could exist. And the second thing is that they're disappearing, so we're witnessing real-time language change. We're always witnessing real-time language change, but this is more like in your face. So, and thirdly, they're fossils, so this is evidence of where sounds have been. So, as I showed you this map at the beginning. I don't know if it's readable, but can I zoom in this? Whatever. So you have these languages that have double underlines. They are languages that currently have this apicolabial sound. And with one underline are languages that used to have apicolabials, but now have them as alveolars or dentals. And if they don't have an underline, they just reflect the Proto-Oceanic bilabials, plain bilabials, as plain bilabials. So this could imply that, again, they had these apicolabials, but then shifted back into bilabials, so there's no trace of them ever existing. But it could also be that they just never went through the shift. And again, we have no proof of that. So thank you for listening. This is it.
Any questions? Yeah.
Just curious if this is nomenclature actually. Are apicolabials the same as linguolabials?
Yes, in literature they're both called linguolabials and apicolabials, but I call them apicolabials because Alexander Francois calls them apicolabials. And
are they only here? Because I thought I read something about a language in Brazil having like a linguolabial trail.
Is it Piraha or is it the other one?
I think it was Piraha.
Okay, well, it's
I know the research status is
yeah, it's disputed because it's tested in 2 other places. In one of them, the only person who knows the language or who has documented the language died, and we don't really have access to any of the info anymore. And the other one is Pirha, and that's just wholly shaky. Yeah. Any other questions?
Please.
Thank you for your interesting presentation. What I got out of this, and maybe another reason why we should care about these, my favorite new class of sounds, is like in terms of historical linguistics, I think they reveal like a mechanic concerning the historical phonologies, as you said.
Yes.
The fact that the fact that tongue was like extended beyond the mouth caused these. I mean, not caused, but caused by these palatalizations. So maybe, yeah, we should care about them, you know, because when we see such a thing, we know that okay, I mean, this might be a trace of an epicolabial.
Yes, true. And there's so many questions to ask. Because I'm kind of disappointed. Okay, well, is that it?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so thank you, first of all. Yeah. So for our final, the camera is going. Yeah, okay. So for the final talk, which is by Sude Yöntemli, her talk is titled Applicative Types and Very Turkish Stance.
Okay, so today I will be infodumping about applicative types and where Turkish stands. First of all, what are applicatives? Applicatives are an argument introducer, just like voice. Voice introduces the subject and applicatives introduces the data. So Cuervo in her 2003 paper argues that datives are not internalized, internal arguments of the verb, but they need a specialized head to introduce them. She actually argues that datives are structural cases, but they still need a specialized head to introduce them. And not to confuse this dative with the goal dative, when we say Ankara'ya paket gönderdim ya da paketi Ankara'ya gönderdim, meaning I sent the package to Ankara. It is classified by Öztürk as a PP, as a post or prepositional phrase. So this dative needs this dative is sensitive to animacy, and it needs an animate thing as a receiver. Okay. So a brief history. Pukkanen proposes a binary structure. And she identifies 2 types of applicatives, high applicatives and low applicatives. Low applicatives are internal arguments of the event structure. Nasıl geri gidiyorum? Low applicatives are internal arguments of the event structure. What does this mean? They are under the verb phrase. This has 2 subtypes, but if I have time, I will explain that later. The applicative law encodes a transfer of possession. This is very important. It encodes a strict transfer of possession, and it relates its argument DP to the theme DP. Do not be confused with the usage of DP and NP. It was called NP before. Now we call it DP, so it doesn't matter. So let's look at the Turkish example. Ayşe Ahmet'e gül verdi. Ayşe gave Ahmet a rose. So if you look at the tree here, the low applicative under the verb phrase, its argument is Ahmet, and Ahmet relates to the theme Gül, and Ahmet has received a rose from Ayşe. So there is a transfer of possession, so Turkish has low applicative. Okay. Pukkanen's high applicative. High applicative is external to the event structure. What does this mean? It is above the VP, above the word phrase. It relates its argument to the event as a beneficiary. So there is no transfer of possession here. Let's look at the Kazakh. I will explain it through the Kazakh example. So I ate food for my mother. So I am eating the food for the benefit of my mother, right? But she is not giving me the food. I am just eating it for her. And they are doing this without any preposition or postposition. They are doing this with dative. So this is the high applicative. So the high applicative's argument mom is related to the whole event of me eating the food for her. So it's above VP, right? External argument. Okay. So Koiro thinks that this is too binary to fit all languages, so she proposes a third type of applicative. This is affective applicative. He argues that Turkish has affective applicative. I'm not explaining the first point because we spent so much time. It doesn't relate to Turkish. If I have time, I will explain. The affective applicative is very interesting because it is somewhat in an intermediary position. Okay, so it is neither high nor low. It is an external argument to the resulting state. So what does this mean? Here is the structure. Means that there is a change of state. So I broke an egg for you. Me breaking an egg is a change of state, right? So this structure, Koiro proposes that denotes that change of state. The affected applicative embeds the resulting state of the egg being broken. And it is the internal argument of the dynamic event, the causing event of the egg being broken. Okay, so it is both an internal argument and an external argument. How does this relate to Turkish? Here, when Nilton Yıldız saw this sentence, she has an MA thesis where she argues that in 2015 and 16 that Turkish has high applicatives. But he argues that Koiro's affected applicative fits Turkish better. Let's look at the sentence. Babam bana yumurta kırdı. My father broke an egg for me. So at first glance, this looks like a high applicative because there is no transfer of possession. Like my father doesn't break the egg for me, like towards me or whatever. But he says that there is an implicational transfer of possession. So my father is breaking the egg for me, and I will receive that egg in the end. So my father is not breaking the egg for my benefit, but never giving it to me. Okay, this is the difference. I hope I was clear about that. So the broken state of the egg is being embedded under the applicative, and the causing event is on top of that. The affected applicative can only embed stative verbs, the state of something being done. Let's look at this. Okay, so this is, I thought at first that bilingual Kurdish-Turkish speakers had high applicative, and monolingual Turkish speakers did not. But then I made a survey in WhatsApp groups, and I collected some judgments there, and it turned out to be wrong. Actually, all of us have affected applicative. Bana çamaşır yıka is wash the clothes for me. So when you wash it is similar to the breaking an egg sentence. So you wash the clothes for me, but then I receive those clothes. You're benefiting me by implying that you're going to give me the clean clothes, yes? Bana bulaşık yıka is the same, wash the dishes for me, bana evi süpür, clean the house for me. The weird thing is, bana 20'de git. This is 20 for me in the car, okay? The speed limit is 20, okay? So this is interesting because there is no transfer of possession whatsoever, not implied, nothing. It doesn't embed a resulting state of something. Like, this is purely high applicative. And 5 speakers found this grammatical. Do you find it grammatical? No? Who finds it grammatical? One person, okay. Yeah, I think this is an exception. I don't think like, yeah. I don't think this is going to break the paradigm. So, and bana yemek ye is another interesting sentence. So this is what we call deputative reading. So I am eating instead of you, something like that. But I am eating for you, like the Kazakh example. Remember, I ate food for my mom. So does bana yemek ye sound grammatical? Where are you from?
I'm from Antalya, but when I say it like this, and I'm interrupting, sorry. When I say it like this, mesela bana öyle bir torun lazım ki bana yemek yesin, bana 20'de gitsin falan.
Oh.
Does this sound good for you?
Really? No, it doesn't. My judgment is broken here. So I've been reading these sentences for too long. I can't judge. Okay, that's very interesting. I will talk. Okay. So I was actually convinced. I'm still, I think, convinced that Key's proposal is correct. That Turkish is classified to have low applicative, like Ahmet Ayşe'ye gül verdi, Ahmet gave Ayşe'ye rose, and Kor was affected applicative. Babam bana yumurta kırdı. Yes, so these exceptions are kind of bugging me, but yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, you first.
Okay, I think these applicatives become more grammatical in questions, like, bana mı yemek yiyorsun? Like, are you eating this for me? Yeah, like, for example, think of a parent that says like, eat your food, and then says, and the child refuses, and then says like, bana mı yiyorsun yemek? I'm not asking this for me, I'm just asking this for you.
Yeah, but I think that
Is it still applicative?
I think it's still affected applicative, so...
I think so as well.
Why? Because when you say that sentence as a Turkish native speaker, I think on
purpose.
I feel the implication of transfer of possession, you know? That's not a very scientific explanation, but I feel like it kind of embeds the resultant state of you eating the meal and somehow giving it to me, you know?
Yeah, because the declarative sounds ungrammatical to me, but the question sounds grammatical.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, bana yemek ye is not okay, but bana mı yemek yiyorsun is okay.
Okay, I see. I think because when you make it a question, it sounds more like the affected applicative? Maybe, okay.
Any more questions? Okay, then, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for coming, everyone. So right now we're gonna do the poll that we proposed that we will do to award the winner. If you will kindly pull out your cell phones and go to this QR code, scan this QR code, which will take you to the website that we will do the poll on, straw poll.
Has everyone voted? Great.
Alright, now we're gonna unfreeze the frame. The winner total is an ounce of tangible
that full. And can you please like all of you come to the center? Yeah. Feel like lighting is really bad. Oh wait, hold on. Hold on. Sadece gölge.
You can go to the very back of the
Yeah.
You'll be waiting for such one.
Okay, yeah.
To exit the venue, please use the back door, and we still have some more coffee if you want. Afterwards, we're going to go to T1.
It should have said I want dumpling.